Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and gatheringmagic.com, your place to explore the game. Now it's time for Judges Corner.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Judges Corner. Today I want to take a look at the Mulligan rules changes that are occurring during the Battle for Zendikar pre-release. But before we take a look at that, I wanted to dive into the history of Magic the Gathering's Mulligan rules and see exactly how they've changed over time.
He's had an incredible weekend, so the words "poor Mike Sigris" don't come naturally. But 4-3.
I like that mulligan too. I mean, as much as I hate the idea of mulliganing down to 3, you've got better hands you can hit. Like, you're not going to win the game with that hand. There are hands that can definitely win you the game.
Mulligans originally were very different and varied from tournament to tournament. There were no published mulligan rules for Magic, and players often created their own. Eventually, Wizards of the Coast came up with a singular mulligan rule, which stated that a player could shuffle their hand back into their deck at the beginning of the game by revealing they had a 7-land or 0-land hand, and drawing 7 new cards. This was a one-time action, and if you took it and ended up with 7 or 0 lands in your hand again, you were out of luck. A big motivation for this change was due to lands that did not tap for mana, like Maze of Ith, which counted against you mulliganing, because they still counted as lands in your hand. This rule was changed to the rules we mostly know today during Pro Tour Paris, 1997. It actually debuted earlier at Pro Tour Los Angeles, but became widely known and accepted during Paris by mistake. The rules for that particular experimental mulligan were accidentally included in the Pro Tour rules packet for Paris. Oh, the days before the internet. So, what that mulligan rule dictated was that the active player would take a mulligan, in which they would shuffle their hand and draw that many cards -1, repeating this process until they were satisfied with their hand, or had no cards. Then, the next player could also perform their mulligans the exact same way. Around the time of Magic 2010, with the huge updates to many fundamental rules, came a slight change to this long-standing mulligan rule. Instead of the active player now taking all of their mulligans and then the non-active player following, the active player announced if they were or weren't going to take a mulligan, and then the non-active player would also make that decision, followed by both players mulliganing simultaneously. This prevented the non-active player from making drastic mulligan decisions based on how far their opponents mulliganed.
We are employing the Vancouver Mulligan Rule, the new Mulligan Rule that's going to become the norm everywhere in Magic once Battle for Zendikar pre-releases arrive on our doorsteps. So these players are utilizing that rule this weekend, the same as it was used at Magic Origins. So to mitigate this mulligan, Owen will get to SCRY 1 on whatever number of cards he ultimately settles on keeping here in the finals.
With the rising popularity of streaming games of Magic on the internet at Grand Prix and Pro Tours, eventually players and Wizards of the Coast realized another update was needed. Spectators hated seeing games where a single or double mulligan resulted in very boring matches to watch, and players also obviously hated the lack of interaction that these games had. So, a small experiment was made during Pro Tour Origins, where during that Pro Tour, players could take their mulligans as normal. And then, once both players were finished performing their mulligans, anyone who had less than their original opening hand could then scry 1 before starting the game. Player reception was overwhelmingly positive for this change, and in late August 2015, the change was made official to go into effect for the first time during the Battle for Zendikar pre-release. So, to summarize, the current rules for mulligans are that the active player announces to keep or mull their opening hand, and then the non-active player does the same. Both players then perform this action at the same time if elected, and anyone not mulliganing now stops and no longer has the option to mull. Anyone who elected to mull may continue to do so following the same process until all players have decided to keep their opening hands. At that point, if anyone has less cards in their hand than their original opening hand, they may scry 1 in the same order in which they mulliganed, which is in the active player, non-active player order. As for other formats that have different mulligan rules, well, those rules may or may not change come September when the policy update goes live. You're going to have to wait and see if they do or don't change and follow those rules accordingly. We'll make sure to keep you informed if they do actually change. So that's it for our episode on mulligans. If you have any questions about this episode or any other questions in general, you can always leave a comment below and someone will be happy to get back to you. Or stay tuned because we're definitely going to be talking more about mulligans when the policy goes live. Until next time, make sure to shuffle thoroughly, play at a reasonable pace, and scry 1 if you mulligan.